mentorship program, a year-long mentorship program, is in design phase, and as soon as it is ready, it will be rolled out. And the last two things is the talks. Today is our first talk. I think Nelisa will tell us more about it. These will happen 6 times in the year, and as they happen, we will be we will also be assisting with career transition. Maybe you are moving into a senior role, you're starting from varsity, you're starting out in a job, you're moving from an internship into a permanent role, or you're moving into an executive role. So we'll have smaller platforms where we are helping each other with career transition. And above all, everything is based on the word of God. Everything is based on prayer and supporting each other as the family of God. Welcome, and thank you to the team that has put this together. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Moruti. So we are now live on YouTube. I'm just trying to share so that we can also be live on Facebook for those who are not on Zoom. And then I will introduce our speaker for the day. Just bear with me for a minute. Okay, it looks like we are all set and ready to go. I'm going to welcome our facilitator for today's session, who is Nelisa Chata. She is a corporate and investment banking professional, and she has almost a decade of experience in the industry. And she is an articulate speaker, an excellent professional, and she also holds a BCom honors degree in business finance from the University of Witwatersrand. Help me welcome Nelisa, who will be facilitating the session for today. You can clap your hands.
Oh, thank you so much. And indeed, welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. Good evening to you all. My name is Nelisa Chata. I'm all the things that Nzondeni said, but more importantly, I'm very passionate about people. I'm passionate about the development and the growth of people. I'm passionate about career conversations. I'm passionate about young careers, Christian careers in particular, and I'm passionate about conversation. So I think tonight's session brings all of my passions together, and I hope you'll derive a lot of value from what we're about to do here today. As Nzondeni rightly said, I think I prefer the title of facilitator more than speaker, just because the intention with these conversations is for them to be inclusive, and so your participation is an integral part of making sure that, first of all, we cover all the content that we need to cover, and that it's beneficial and sort of universally beneficial, irrespective of, say, age or life stage or career stage or circumstance or anything like that. So I think right off the bat, what I want to say is, please start thinking about what productivity questions, comments, tidbits, and best practice you'd like to share for the benefit of the entire audience. Make sure that you ping those in the chat with the help of Nzondeni and his team. We'll pick up on some of those, try and discuss them on the platform, and really just make this time very worthwhile for all of us. Right. So today, I don't actually have a lot to say, with a strong expectation and a strong reliance that a lot of the content will actually be coming out of you as the audience. I wanted to begin this talk about productivity just at a point where you say how you think about your personal productivity, how productive you are as a person, has a lot to do with the end goal. Like, what are you trying to get at? What are you trying to achieve? So I asked this question to myself, and I actually made a list. So I kind of stated that I feel productive when. then I started to list the instances or circumstances when I feel like I'm really being productive. And I defined all of those things as my end goal. So I was like, I feel productive when I have achieved the most out of each productive hour in a day. I feel productive when I am able to do all the things to which I have committed in that day. I feel productive when the amount of time I have spent or on an exercise or on an activity is explained or justified by the quantity of the output and the quality of the output. I feel productive when I have done something and when I have done something well in the shortest time possible. I feel productive when I have created value. So those were the 5 points that I kind of wrote down for myself that define what the end goal is for me when it comes to productivity. And I think my encouragement for you all is to embark on a similar exercise and ask yourself, what does productivity look like for you, and what is the end goal? And I think in answering that question, you then can work backwards to kind of look at what are the steps that you can take in order to get to that end goal. So throughout the presentation, I'll be making a little bit of reference to this list of mine that I've created. I've designed the presentation to be a lot more experiential and then anecdotal. I mean, I could list the number of books that are available on this subject, the number of podcasts, the number of blogs, articles, you name it. And so I thought the best way to make this offering worthwhile is to really share some of my experiences, what I've called some of the odds and ends and hacks around productivity, which I found in my life. And so I hope those can be beneficial to you as well. So I came up with a list of about 6 things, which will serve as the 6 mini topics for today, and then we'll drive my part of the discussion to an end and sort of bring you in with some clarifying questions or any subject matter that you want to raise around the topic of productivity. So the first, right? So I'm calling this list of mine odd bits and hacks around productivity. The first big thing for me is the physiology, right? So I put a little note here for myself that says a broken body cannot be productive, even less so a broken mind or a broken spirit. And this is really me just trying to say that we cannot underestimate the importance of our physiology when it comes to pursuing our productivity goals. So before we attach ourselves to any big sort of theories that are out there or try and get the latest 5 lists of and 7 steps to, we need to kind of look at what the makeup is of our physiology, of our current state, and whether or not that actually aids to our endeavor to be more productive people. And this became an increasingly important thought for me in particular over the lockdown period, right? I started to think about what benefits were there to my physiology by virtue of working in an office. I started thinking about the fact that, for instance, when you're in an office environment, you have ergonomic specialists, I think is what they call them. Now, these people are there to make sure that from an ergonomic standpoint, that your physiology is taken care of. They are there to make sure that you have standing desks, for instance, to increase your mobility during the day while you work. They are there to assess, for instance, the level of your screen to make sure that your neck isn't taking strain. They are there to make sure that your eyesight, for instance, is not being impacted by your work setup. The furniture, even the office furniture in itself, is ergonomically designed to support, say, your lumbar, to support people who are pregnant and all of those things. So those are the benefits that you have just by being in an office environment, for instance, that can aid how well you work. But the remote working construct, for instance, took that away. And so you have to make sure that you are now taking care of your own physiology such that nothing about your physique and nothing about your body is impacting your productivity and your ability to work. And so suddenly you have to be a lot more conscious about your own mobility, a lot more conscious about taking breaks, a lot more conscious about deliberately working in those off times or those little breaks throughout your workday, just just to make sure that your physiology is right. I found that the period for me caused me to pay a lot more attention to how much I exercise, how much I eat, how much I sleep, etc., and to be super uncompromising about it. So really the first point to begin when you're having a productivity discussion is to really assess what your physiology looks like and what elements you can tweak or change just to make sure that it isn't your physiology that's interfering with your ability to be productive. So that's on the body front. Then on the spirit front. So if you remember, the point was a broken body cannot be productive, but even less so a broken mind or a broken spirit. So I found this verse, Proverbs 18:14, which has found a lot of universal application in my life, but I quite like it because it says, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit, right? And this thing became so profound for me because it was like, you know what? The spirit of a man, if it is kept well and if it is kept right, can even bear the man through an ailing body. It can even carry you through like a breakdown of your body, but who can bear a broken spirit? And that for me really pointed to the fact that we need to be so uncompromising in taking care of our spirit man, because that spirit man even has the ability to bear up an otherwise sick body. So I'm going to end it there for now because there's quite a bit to get through. So that was me just looking at the state of the body, the state of the mind, and the state of the spirit in aiding your productivity goals. Fine. Then I moved on to a subject that is probably a little less ethereal. And I started to think about how important it is for us to distinguish between the demands of our work versus the demands of our work environment that will aid in us pursuing our productivity goals. And this one was an interesting one for me. And I found it to be a very sort of banking specific example. And so drawing from my own experience, I remember experiencing a lot of burnout and feeling like I wasn't quite being effective in my role. And in asking myself the question why or what the root cause is, I realized that in my way of work, I was actually honoring a lot of the unspoken expectation that bankers work long hours more than I was honoring what the requirements of my job description actually are. And the issue with this is that I found myself kind of trying to spread my workload over more hours just so that I could honor the culture of bankers work late. We don't go home past midnight or 1 a.m. And so I started subconsciously even shifting tasks that could be performed quickly, tasks that could be performed during the day. I started shifting those to the nighttime so that I could build up that nighttime agenda and be found to be counted amongst those who were working and working hard well into the night. And I realized that spoke to how unproductive I actually was and how unproductively I was using my days. And I mean, the great thing about it is that you get the applause, you get the attention, you get the commendation of your colleagues and your peers, but you actually find that you can't show up for anything else but work now, because everything that is work related is starting to eat even into the time where you could be dedicating to other activities, social activities, to your family, to your friends, etc. So I embarked on this exercise just to distinguish between what is the demand of my actual work versus honoring social expectations that come by virtue of being in a particular industry or being in a particular job. And what I found fascinating about arriving at what my work actually demands is that I could segregate the activities of my work and still make time to be me, right? I was in the type of job, for instance, that required a lot of client interaction during the day, that required a lot of bringing stakeholders together during the day to accomplish a certain goal. And so I realized that that work was best kept for the daytime, for the time that everybody else makes themselves available to me. Parts of the nighttime could then be used for tasks that involve analysis, that involve a lot of the thinking work, a lot of the creating work that only requires me. right? And in just understanding that that was actually the only requirement out of my job, it created space for me to be able to better utilize the nighttime and to have a better relationship with the dark hours, which is a point that I expand on a little bit on later. So I'm going to leave that there for now. But the emphasis is just distinguish between what is the demand of your actual work versus you honoring other demands, for instance, just environmental or social demands around your work. Okay, cool. Then point number 3 out of the list of 6 that I had to think about when I was thinking about productivity is the question, is less than perfect still okay? So will you be the person that struggles for that last 5%, right? And this was such a personal one for me as well, as someone who has this constant desire to want to improve on something that is already pretty good, right? And it becomes a hack, because the lesson that you don't learn or the lesson that you miss is that not every improvement moves the dial. Right? So not every piece of work done on that financial model, not every adjustment made to that presentation or that piece of analysis is actually going to move the dial enough such that it warrants the time. Now, I don't know if any of you have obsessive personalities much like I do, but I will be the person that will sit there and struggle for that last percent. I will be that person that sits and looks at something that's already pretty good and be like, how can we make it even better? Whilst I think it is a noble intention and a noble endeavor, you find that that's actually when you get stuck. For instance, I have found myself trying to improve things that are already really good. And now all of a sudden I'm watching YouTube videos, which take about like 12 minutes a pop in order to gain some additional insight on how to improve a certain piece of analysis or a certain model. I'll find myself now speaking to additional colleagues or speaking to additional stakeholders just to see what else I can cram into this really good piece of work. And before you know it, I'm compromising on the deadline. Before you know it, I'm compromising on like how quickly and efficiently I can deliver. I'm delaying other areas that are relying on my piece of work as their input. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you start to see that that doesn't aid to your productivity, and it actually has a ripple effect in terms of how much it affects everything else that has to do with your work. So the biggest lesson there, or the biggest takeaway for me, was that in order to be more productive, I need to learn to accept that less than perfect is still pretty darn good. Fine. Moving on then to point number 4 of our 6-point list. So this one I titled The Brain, right? The brain is made for thinking and not for remembering. And this too I found to be a very big productivity hack. Just learning how to use your mind properly, not cluttering your mind with stuff that can be otherwise written down, right? And it kind of seems like a very facetious way to state the fact that just use paper, like write stuff down. But if you take the humor aside for a little while, it points to something that many of us do and that we do erroneously. And this is to really fill our minds with things that are only meant for memory. And we're taking away capacity from our mind to think and to create, right? And the more I started to think about it, like it became really, really profound for me, because I was like, what the brain is meant to do is more than just to be a storage facility. Do you understand? It's actually meant to help you dynamically, instantaneously generate solutions, instantaneously generate ideas around problems or issues that are at hand. And I found that the consequences of cluttering my mind with things that can easily be written down and so delegated to the paper is that it inflates my perception of how much I can wing it, you know, how much I can wing circumstances, and probably a lot more than I should. Because if you think about the number of times that we are put in environments where we are not the subject matter expert, the number of times where we are put in environments where the problem is new when you hear it in that moment, there is nothing about a cluttered mind that contributes to your ability to generate solutions, your ability to engage engage content on the spot and to offer meaningful analysis, to offer meaningful commentary when your mind is just filled with stuff that can otherwise be written down. And obviously we know that the benefit of writing stuff down is that you actually get around to it all, is that you remember it better and you honor all your commitments even more. So that's me who's going to end on that point there. Just use your brain properly. Instead of using it as a storage facility, use it as a tool for thinking and creating. So that for me, I find was like a massive productivity addition. Yeah. So then the fifth point that I wanted to speak about around this productivity topic is the concept of Monday. So I don't know how many of you have seen the memes, right, around Monday. And the whole thing about Monday is this feeling that you get, this anxious feeling that you get on Sunday. When Sunday stops feeling like Sunday, and all of a sudden you start to replay all of the things that you have to do on Monday and everything that you have to do during the week. And it is the worst. And I found that as I progressed in my career, this Monday phenomena became increasingly prevalent. And so I had to teach myself how to properly utilize my Sundays, not just as Sabbath rest, not just as a day of taking time out, but literally if I steal even just an hour of Sunday and of Sunday leisure, I can completely change what the outlook of my Monday is and completely change what the outlook of the rest of my week is. Simply taking an hour, even if it's just to organize your calendar, for instance, look at just what you have ahead. Taking a moment to organize your emails, for instance, on a Sunday. Taking the time to communicate any sort of deliverables or anything you want to commit to, either to yourself or to other stakeholders, just to demonstrate that you are ahead of it. Because there's nothing worse than that feeling of arriving on a Monday morning and feeling like you're already behind, And so paying attention to the Monday phenomenon was such a big tool and such a big addition to my toolkit when it came to managing how productive I am and how productively I work. Fine. So then point number 6, before I kind of hand over to all of you for any questions and comments, is just to make a comment around COVID and around the remote working environment that was emphasized by COVID. I think the biggest takeaway for me around productivity and around COVID was setting very hard limits. And there were instances where I felt like the behavior was a little bit radical, but I also quickly reasoned it out that the behavior was radical to address a very radical problem, a problem of not having boundaries and a problem of not having limits. For instance, I became a lot stricter around deadlines, around time parameters for activities. So I started to decline meetings, for instance, that were over an hour long, where it was in my capacity and ambit to decline. From a personal perspective, I decided that I would remove the element of housework, for myself. I decided that there was no part of my day that would be spent on excessive cleaning, just because I now live in this house a lot more than I did, And that decision, even in and of itself, kind of came with like a lot of questions. I was just like, oh my gosh, am I just a lazy person or what's happening? But I realized that it was the cleaning, for instance, that took up so much of my energy and so much of my day. And every day I found that I had reason to complain about how, so much work to do, but I wasn't really changing anything about the way in which I organized the days to make more time. So I checked the housework. I was just like, no housework. That meant delegating out the housework, looking at what alternatives were available to me in terms of cleaning companies and all sorts of things. But yeah, no housework. And then I also began to change my relationship with sleep, right? And this may sound a little bit controversial because, all the self-help books out there will tell you need to get enough sleep and you need to have 8 hours and blah, blah, blah. But I realized that my most productive hours were actually the night hours. And so I could no longer equate darkness with the time to stop working, and that was a big change for me. But when I made it, I realized that I was super, super productive, because for instance, 4 hours of nighttime work could do or could accomplish what I would spend like the entire 8-hour day trying to achieve. So I started delineating the day hours to other activities that probably didn't require a lot of analysis, a lot of critical thinking, just the churn, just getting work done and getting it done quickly. But the analysis hours, the analysis work, I would then leave for the nighttime. So that was how I really rejigged my productivity profile during COVID. And then the last two things that came with COVID that really, really helped my productivity was looking at the things that I did just because I had always done them, right? And deciding whether these things would continue in the new normal. And these were difficult decisions I had to make because I was even in voluntary institutions where I think the commitments were more ego-related commitments more than they were necessary commitments. And I had to kind of learn to just cut because they were not serving me well in the new normal. I started to learn the necessity of teaching other people what I do so that they could do it and sort of free me up to operate a lot better in the new normal. And so those were some of the things that were such a big change for me during the COVID era around remote working, and they definitely aided a lot of my productivity goals. And so that kind of brings my segment of the talk or the discussion to an end. And you'll recall that where we began is how you rejig your productivity profile is knowing what being productive looks like for you, like what the outcome is. And so I began with stating that for me, I feel productive when I have achieved the most out of the hours that have been allotted to me. I feel productive when I have delivered on all the commitments that I said I would do. I feel productive when the input is actually justified by how great the output is. I feel productive when I've done something really, really well and I've done it in the shortest time possible. And I feel productive when I have created value. So I'm going to end it there and maybe hand over to Nzundeni. Nzundeni, I don't know if you're going to facilitate the discussion element of our session today, but that's all from me and that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Nelly. So we can just clap for her for such a wonderful presentation that she did. So now we'll be opening it up for anyone who has a follow-up question with regards to the points that she made. And if you're here, I don't know who it is. So you can just make your comment or your question.
Greetings, Bazalwane, in the name of Jesus. Sister Nelisa, thank you very much. Madam Nelisa, maybe because we're talking jobs, we should not call you sister. Thank you very much for an insightful presentation. Mine is just a request to ask, please, that you, since you already told us that you wrote it down, given that you don't use your brain for memory, please share it with us. And again, those who are not on the group, it will be shared on the group. So if you're not on the group, don't be inboxing us, asking us to share on the side. Thank you very much, Nelisa. Well done.
Absolutely, I will do.
Thank you for that. There is a hand from Spiwe. Spiwe, you can go ahead with your comment.
Oh no, it was the exact same as what Mamanche said. So it was just for her to share and just to give us maybe at a high level those 6 points again. But I think sharing it will be even much better. Thank you.
Awesome. Galaxy A20. Galaxy A20, you can ask your question or make a comment. Okay, I see there's a hand up for Galaxy A20, but I see no response.
Yeah, there is. You know what? For Spew's benefit, I'm happy to, and everybody else as well, I'm happy to quickly run through the points on a high level, because in case anyone wants to like scroll them down, but I'll definitely share the 1-page presentation that I had prepared. So the first one, Spew, was a broken body cannot be productive, and even less so a broken mind or a broken spirit. So that was the point around the physiology. And then distinguishing between the demands of your work versus the demands of your work environment. The third is less than perfect, still okay. Will you be the person that struggles for that last 5%? Number 4, the brain is not for remembering, but is for thinking. So use it right. Number 5, the Smande phenomenon.
Slow down, Nelisa.
Friend, no. So number 5. Where are you? Where did I lose you?
I'm still trying to write down number 2.
I'm afraid. Okay, distinguishing between the demands of your work versus the demands of the work environment. Yeah. And then, is less than perfect still okay? Will you be the person that struggles for 5%? That last 5%. And then number 4, the brain. Use it right. The brain is for thinking and not remembering. And then 5 was the Monday phenomenon. So that anxiety that you get on Sunday as you prepare for Monday or as you think about Monday. And then number 6, just some of the thoughts I shared around COVID and remote working, and some of the rejigging of my own productivity profile that I did over that time. Cool. I hope you caught some of them.
Okay.
All of them this time. Thank
for
you.
those who haven't been able to write them down, they will be shared on the group. If you are not on the group yet, you can just say here on the text, or let me just put my number, and then you can WhatsApp me if you are not on the group, so that you are added and you can also see the future events that take place. Galaxy A20, we were not hearing you the first time. We'll give you a chance to say your comment.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name, hopefully everyone is hearing me now.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Puseletso. My surname is Ngwana. I just saw the post at Instagram from Mancha, so I was interested to attend. So the question that I have tonight is, okay, I was a student on 2018 and then I got a job at NRCS. So currently I'm working and I'm also studying. So I'm struggling with productivity, both at work and at school. So my question was, how do I show productivity at work and at school as an individual? Especially, I've went through a lot last year where I've lost my baby this year on February. I gave birth last year, December. So I've lost my baby this year, February. So it results to physiology, where I'm broken spiritually, I'm broken mindfully, even my body is broken. Like I feel tired every single day. So I like productivity both at work and at school. So how can I show productivity through the journey that I'm going through?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Puseles. Before you can go on, Elisa, we can take 2 at a time. So you can just write that one down. Kakleho Ngato, I see your hand is also up. You can give your comment.
Good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Good morning.
This is just a quick question with relation to sleep, because I heard you saying that you had to change your relationship with sleep. Considering that in the beginning we referred to physiology, and I do believe an element has to be rest and or sleep. So when do you determine that it's time to sleep? Like, do you sleep when you're tired, or do you sleep when you're done? Like, how do you know that you're giving your body enough of what it needs while not eating away at your productivity? Thank you.
Thank you, Kakeho. Nelisa, you can tackle those two questions.
Sure. Yeah, I think at the risk of not wanting to sound like an expert, like I invite everybody else who has a viewpoint on any of the questions that have been raised to share as well. I think what becomes more beneficial than just me sort of sitting here and preaching to everyone is how through conversation we can kind of reason through our common issues. So I'm going to respond to Katleho first around the sleep thing. And I was so scared that this question would come up because I think my sleep habits 100% go against what the professionals would recommend. Like what we've seen in the literature is, 8 hours of sleep and this quality of REM, etc., etc. And to be honest with you, having observed my own physiology over the 29 years that I have lived, I know for a fact that I don't need those 8 hours of sleep. And so a lot of my recommendations and a lot of my views around sleep stem from that fact. I'm a napper, so I habitually nap. Yes, like I take a nap during the day, I take some time out in the evening a little bit around like 7-ish or so. And literally those are sufficient recharges for me to literally push another 4 or 5 hours of productivity. I can't in good conscience recommend that as the gospel, right? But I think the lesson is study your own physiology and don't just take any one person's word for it. Even the people with the fancy doctorates that are like, you need the 8 hours of sleep, just find out what your makeup is and kind of honor that. I will say this though, that in my not sleeping very much, I take really good care of, and I pay a lot of attention to what I eat. I pay a lot of attention to just what I put inside of my body. So I am not a big consumer, for instance, of flesh. So I don't really eat a lot of meat. The sugar intake, we've left it to the Lord because I don't know. But I try to really, cut back on the sugar as well, which I find really causes my energy levels to like spike and drop a lot. So I think being mindful of that also compensates for the fact that I might not necessarily sleep like the full 8 hours as is recommended by some. So yes, Katleho, I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Okay. And then I think it was I just missed your first name. I'm sorry. I think it was it Vanessa? Puseletso, I'm so sorry, Puseletso, yes. First and foremost, like I just want to express my deepest condolences for the loss of your child. And I think what is great is that you've already identified that a large part of your productivity struggles are related to your physiology, are related to how your body is functioning at the moment, which is probably not at its most optimal, are related to a little bit of your spirit, and how that is probably not at its best right now. The only counsel that I think I can, even in good conscience, offer is that make sure that you are aware of all the remedies that are at your disposal in those buckets, right? So when we look at the functioning of the body as an example, exercise is always recommended as a remedy to improve how your body works. Looking at what you're eating and what you're putting into it is a remedy that is at your disposal immediately, and that can dramatically change how your body responds to pressure and how it responds to the requirement for work. When it comes to a lot of the psychological and sort of emotional issues, think about what remedies are available to you in that regard. You have remedies that exist in sort of the psychological and talk therapy world that could be made available to you. You have remedy through religion and seeking religious counsel, for instance. So that means being part of a church or identifying a religious leader who can then counsel you through some of those those issues that you are facing. So that's what I can recommend to you in good conscience. And we do have pastors who are on the platform at the moment that you can most definitely reach out to for some additional support. I remain available. Zundeni and the rest of the team as well can take your contact details and just make sure that you are linked up with people who can kind of help you through the challenges that you are facing. Yeah.
Thank you, Nelisa. We can take 2 more comments or questions that are there. Just raise your hand and then we'll give you the opportunity.
So I see there's a question on the chat about energy tablets, boosters, or energy drinks. All the tough ones. So I do take supplements, but more in the vitamin and mineral world more than energy tablets or any boosters. I'm a habitual tea drinker, not a big coffee drinker, but I love green tea, and I find that it gives me sort of the kick that you'd expect out of caffeine, but without like the big energy drop that you experience afterwards. So I drink a lot of tea is the answer to that.
Okay, anyone else with a question or a comment, feel free to go ahead. If you can't raise your hand or Katlego, your hand is raised, you can go ahead.
Hello, me again. Okay, so my question is with relation to demands from your work and demands from your work environment, right? So generally when we attend talks like this or stuff like that, we're advised to find an organization with a culture that you fit in. So how do you identify, let me say, elements of the culture that don't really work for you? Do you nitpick, or how do you go around that?
So that it's a very good question and a very relevant question. I think what even becomes more important than that exercise is the timing of the exercise. So the time to decide that a particular culture or a particular cultural element doesn't suit you is not in the middle of your job. It's probably before you sign the offer, right? And that's what becomes important, doing that level of due diligence, like speaking to the people who are already in firm, people who have left, and what their experience has been of the firm. So that's just the first part I wanted to answer. But in the actual exercise, like, man, it's so important. Like, I know personally that I have turned down job opportunities on the basis of being sure that I would not be a culture fit. For instance, like, I'm in a stage of my life now where I've moved away from banking and I'm stepping into another side of financial services. And a large part of my motivation to do that was the fact that I wasn't keen to honor the long working hours that are associated with banking culture anymore. However, I took that decision having served my time, having paid my dues, you know, so I felt like I had done it and I had earned my stripes and it was enough. So I left. So a lot of the questions are really existential, and a lot of them are really personal. I wouldn't trade up the banking experience for anything. However, I was clear that there was a finite end to it. Like, it wasn't going to be the thing I did forever. And that just came from being a super reflective person, just checking in with self at every single point. Where am I? Does this resonate with, you know, what my value system is? Does it actually match up with how I'm trying to set up my life going forward? And those are questions that you repeatedly ask yourself, so that at every turn you can make those pivots and you can make those changes.
Thank you. So we have 5 more minutes where we can still take questions and comments from you before we can close the session. So anyone else with a question, feel free to raise your hand. If you you are too shy to speak, you can just put it on the chat. Okay, there is Mancha and Shosho. You can go ahead.
Okay, this is true.
Yes, you can go
Okay,
ahead,
good
Shosho.
evening. Thank you, Nzunde. Okay, I think there was a question that was asked by Puseleto earlier, but firstly, I think joining everybody else condolences, and I think if you need any form of support as a church, we are available. I think some of the things we can try and assist you outside this specific forum. So condolences to you. And you had raised the question around how how do you balance between you work, you study, and I mean both those things have serious demands. I mean you have to produce at work, and at the same time you have to produce at school. And I think I mean this thing sounds silly, but it's actually quite true that when a person says they don't have time, it's not true, because everybody has 24 hours. I mean, so all of us have time. We just slice and dice it for the things which are important to us. And that's the truth about everything in life. We just allocate pockets of time for things that we think are important. And I think, and sometimes we need to sacrifice certain things for others, depending on what's important at the time. So it's a principled advice, really, that priorities are not static. Priorities are fluid. Let's take an example. Because it's financial year end, work can be the most important thing at that time. But it's because it's financial year end, so work is demanding. Because it's exams time, school could be the most important thing, at the time, and many other real things that we get involved in. And I think that's the thing. But more than that, one has to try and allocate this pocket of time to activities on a daily basis. And I mean, like Melissa spoke a lot about productivity. That's really how you improve your productivity. You allocate this time, pockets of time, to specific things. And I mean, be disciplined enough to honor those commitments. If you had said, I'll stop work at 5, have a hard stop, because you need to go do something else, which is important, like study. And sometimes why we fail to balance those things is because we actually don't have that discipline of a hard stop at a specific time, because we need something else. So I mean, generally that's really how you try and make sure that you can produce in both circumstances, in both contexts, whether at work or at school. That's my little contribution, Mr. Ntsundeni. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shosho, for that contribution. Galaxy A20 has raised the hand again. You can ask your question.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to comment that I would really appreciate an outside conversation with someone that can help me to maintain my productivity both at work and at school. I would really appreciate that a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is noted. Please also inbox me on WhatsApp so that I can connect you with the people who can be able to help on that regard. I've put my numbers on the chat. Okay, we can take 2 more questions or comments before we close. Okay, I will take silence as there is no other question. So thank you so much to everyone for attending this, and special thanks to our facilitator, Nelisa, for sharing such beautiful nuggets. And this is going to be helpful for me personally, and I believe that for everyone else is also going to be helpful. So I will stop the sharing on YouTube, but not close the service yet before